Hey everybody, this is John from MTG Nexus, continuing our Modern Horizons discussion, discussing which decks in Modern have benefited the most from new printings from Ixalan through Modern Horizons itself. As a friendly reminder, if you like what you're seeing on the channel, please consider subscribing, giving us a thumbs up, giving a constructive comment down below, as we strive to become the most informative, lightning bolt-based channel on YouTube for Modern. So the first deck that benefited from printings from Dominaria through Modern Horizons is Izzet Phoenix. Some people may not realize that Izzet Phoenix actually existed as an archetype before the printing of Arclight Phoenix itself. It was previously known as Thing Ascension, which basically was built around the cards Thing in the Ice and Pyromancer's Ascension. So some of the more combo-based versions of Izzet Phoenix that have started to pop up with like Noxious Revivals and such kind of harken back to the original days of what the deck was before Izzet Phoenix was printed. Other cards that this deck has benefited from are a lot of builds use Opt. Some of the newer versions have been using something like Finale of Promise. Other cards that have also seen play in the archetype of recent printing are Crackling Drake, Saheeli, and other such cards, but mostly support players. The main card that has benefited this archetype was Arclight Phoenix. The next archetype is something near and dear to my heart that has benefited tremendously from recent printings. Burn, New Horizon lands will fit most easily into this archetype of any of the existing archetypes. Might fit into something like Izzet Phoenix, but usually as a 1 of or 2 of, whereas Burn, some people are talking about running 4, 6, maybe even 8 going to mono red builds. Other cards that have been printed in recent notes, Skewer the Critics and Light Up the Stage caused a bit of a controversy for a couple months as people were trying to figure out which cards to fit in their builds, how to fit them in the builds. Rakdos kind of picked up steam as a Burn, and Burn was hitting up to 8 to 10% of GP metagames, which had been previously unheard of for Burn for a long time. And finally, another card that's kind of popped up of recent note was Cindervines. People are still debating whether that should be Destructive Revelry, Cindervines, Wear Tear, Smash to Smithereens, whatever their artifact or enchantment hate. But this is definitely an archetype that has benefited and something that is near and dear to my heart and this channel. Another archetype that's benefited from the printings of Ixalan through Modern Horizons was the Humans archetype. Previous to this, Humans was a collected company-based 3 or 4 color deck, using things like Avacyn's Pilgrim in addition to Noble Hierarch to accelerate out their plays. Cards that have been printed since then, Unclaimed Territory and Kitesail Freebooter were the big push to move Humans toward the Aether Vial 5-color mana base that we see now. Other cards that have been printed to help out the deck are things like Militia Bugler, which allow the deck to grind a little bit, finding more copies of the cards that it needs to find. Things like Deputy Detention and Knight of Autumn giving outs to problematic permanents like enchantments or artifacts, and things like Damping Sphere being printed to give them game against things like Tron. This is an archetype that's benefited tremendously from some of the new printings. Another deck that's had its share of rises and falls last time was powered out by the unbanning of Golgari Gravetroll, and the deck proved to be too powerful with the printing of things like Incident Neonate and such, so Golgari Gravetroll was banned. The deck continued to exist in some form or other as kind of a boogeyman that would pop up every once in a while, but did have noted vulnerabilities to aggressive decks and decks that could go over top with things like Tron, as well as Graveyard Hate. However, the printing of Creeping Chill help swing the aggressive matchups. Decks like Humans, decks like Izzet Phoenix before it adopted Surgical Extractions, and decks like Burn, etc. Turned it into very favorable matchups for the Dredge, being able to race more consistently now with that life buffer that card gives you as just a part of their executing their strategy. In addition to that, recent cards such as Assassin's Trophy and Blaststone have given this deck outs to some of the Graveyard Hate cards, more flexible answers to things like Leyline, Rest in Peace, etc. One archetype that probably received, in my opinion, the biggest boost outside of the reformed versions of Humans and Izzet Phoenix was Blue-White Control. In addition to the banning of Jace the Mind Sculptor in recent memory, printing of cards like Opt, which turned the Terminus build into a thing. Other cards that have been printed of new note, things like Teferi, Hero of Dominaria, has kind of formed a tag team with Jace the Mind Sculptor. In more recent note, things like Narset Parter of Veils, Teferi Time Raveler, Dovin's Veto, and Blaststone have given this deck a lot of life, and currently this is one of the most rapidly ascending decks in the format prior to the printing of Modern Horizons, which will also give it something like Force of Negation potentially. So this is a archetype that has benefited tremendously. It remains to be seen what happens when the London Mulligan rule goes into place, but this is certainly an archetype that has benefited from new printings among the most in the format. Finally, a deck that is kind of near and dear to my heart. It's a pretty close cousin to Burn, Mono Red Phoenix. Cards that have helped this archetype move forward, things like Art Like Phoenix, making cards like Faithless Looting a little bit more realistic, along with Light Up the Stage and Finale of Promise, give this deck some punch and some late game. This was an archetype that really didn't exist before the printing of Arclight Phoenix. Unlike Izzet Phoenix, which existed as the Thing Ascension deck, this deck didn't really exist in any form. There was no real reason to look for purely mono-red aggressive deck that wasn't either Burn or Goblins. So this is definitely an archetype that's benefited tremendously from new printings, in addition to existing cards that already existed, things like Gut Shot, Faithless Looting, etc., and Arclight Phoenix giving you outlets for all those spells, along with Manamorphose. This is definitely a archetype that has benefited from new printings, but probably not had the excess of some of the other archetypes on this list. So I want to know your thoughts. What decks have benefited most from recent printings from Ixalan through Modern Horizons? What decks do you think will benefit most from Modern Horizons printings themselves? As a friendly reminder, I want to thank everybody for tuning into this video. If you like what you're seeing, please consider hitting subscribe, checking out our Twitter page, and checking out our Patreon page. Links are down below the video here. Until next time, this has been John for MTG Nexus.